I'm David van Eegen. I've been working with for Kids Company, for about 8 years now. My background is in mental health, but with some specific training in neuroscience. I did a master's many years ago at Liverpool, and it's taken me on quite an interesting roller coaster ride, because I came to Kids Company initially thinking, I want to train as a clinical psychologist. I want to, get out there and really help people. And through the NHS, I got to work with the elderly and I got to work with adults. But I hadn't worked with young people. So I moved back from the Northwest where I did my degree, and I came back to London. Thank you, Mum and Dad. You gave me a room for 6 months, and I got a job and started volunteering with Kids Company on Saturdays. One evening, I think it was in late November, I just remember it was cold and dark, really, and this rather colourful lady, Camilla, our CEO, Camilla Batman-Gelage, you may have seen her, heard of her. She's easier to see than hear. Actually, that's not true. She's pretty easy to do both. But she called me and said, darling, hello, we want to investigate stress. Our kids keep talking to us about stress. You have a master's degree, it's enough. Give up your job in a shoe shop and come and work for me. I have to hasten to add, my job in a shoe shop was actually working for someone who imported shoes and leather goods and sold to the high street, and I thought I was desperately important. But she introduced me to some really inspiring people who reminded me that actually working with others, with other people, really does replace any sense of money, any sense of prestige and position. Because I was lucky enough to get a daily dose of thank you, which is remarkable in this day and age. So, I came in with my books, came in with my knowledge, came in with my lovely degree certificates, and started thinking about stress. And Camilla said, stop thinking about the books. Go and work with our children. Read their stories. I've interviewed 400 of them. And they keep talking about this stress. Go and read their stories and start there. And think about this word, David. Think about empathy. I thought, oh, God, no, I'm a scientist. I don't do that. That's not interesting. Well, this is the journey that empathy led me on and helped us underpin a lot of our work and inspired the way we work with our children. And my only job was to write it down, what we were actually doing, to help make it more understandable for those out there who maybe struggle with quite an oblique concept, love, how are we going to love these children? Well, maybe it starts off with trying to just get that sense of empathy in what's going on. So, the effect of stress and the need for calm. Whilst reading about stress, it was pretty difficult to work out what on earth they were talking about, because it seemed to be everything and anything. Anything from chest pains, exhaustion, hunger, to illness, to arguments, to worry. So, first thing I had to do was try and think of what am I talking about when I'm talking about stress? Well, it's a bit of a catch-all. I like to use the example that two people can be stood on a cliff top. One person can be enjoying that view immensely. The other person can be absolutely terrified. Or for those of you who've maybe ridden a roller coaster, some of you may have gone straight to the back of the queue again and gone on for a second time. Others of us have walked away and been very happy with just an ice cream for the rest of the day. So, it is a very subjective experience. And we all get it. And we all manage it most of the time. This is, please don't worry about memorizing this diagram. It's basically a breakdown of the two ways we have to deal with stress. The blue pathway is the way we manage medium and low-level stress. When we're thinking about bills, when we're thinking about shopping, when we're thinking about what to do next, when we're in an exam, those sorts of things. Maybe even doing some public speaking. But hopefully, using something called the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, where we can put together facts and figures and work out ways of dealing with problems and coming to solutions, we have a low impulse, a low aggression, and a hopefully not violent approach to these problems. We have a thoughtful response. And that's ideal most of the time. But we also have another side. We have a side that when we lose our temper, and we do, we all have a threshold, some of us higher than others, and that's mediated by a structure called the amygdala. And so what I was trying to do is to get into why are these guys being so impulsive and aggressive? And this was the first hook. You know, the words impulsive and aggressive were used. The literature kept talking about the amygdala. Suddenly the word emotion started becoming very, very important. Now, my studies showed me that the two systems, they talk to each other endlessly. The prefrontal cortex basically calms the amygdala down. It reassures it. For want of a better description, it does the calm chat, going, don't worry, those dark shapes, those people on the street corner, you actually know them. They're not going to rob you. It's okay. And the amygdala will just go, yeah, all right, yeah, but, you know, just register the threat. And the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, they actually release some what are called neurotransmitters to keep the amygdala calm. However, the amygdala is also feeding back information the whole time, but by releasing its own little set of neurotransmitters. It's fascinating, the brain. There's almost like chemical warfare going on between the two, all the different structures. But here's a picture of the prefrontal cortex in peach. It's at the front of the brain. It's something that develops after we're born. It's quite small when we're born, but it inflates in size very quickly. And it develops with educational experience, socialization, talking to people, doing things, listening to things, playing with different colored bricks, anything. And it's very useful. We've got the biggest one of the animal kingdom. And it's also a bit of a tricky thing to deal with because it's what helps us be able to lie, which is something only we can do. And here are pictures of the amygdala and the hippocampus. Don't worry about the names. Amygdala is just Greek for walnut, almond. And hippocampus, again, is Greek for seahorse. When brains were first dissected, I'm going to guess at about 400 BC. Hands up if anyone knows different. Good. When they dissected them, they just named them after things they looked like. The amygdala in red looked a bit like an almond. The hippocampus in purple looked a bit like a seahorse. So, you know, don't worry about this kind of stuff. But they have a conversation. And when stress starts to increase, when stress starts to become, well, excuse my... Yes, when stress starts to increase, the amygdala registers things like somebody's body position. It registers things like noise level, pheromones, skin tone. Did I say body posture? Yeah, also mean tone of voice, things like that. It'll even register the size of somebody else's pupil. This is something that the makeup industry has keyed into and is obviously trying to make a lot of money by fooling each other's amygdala into convincing us that we fancy each other. But it's a wonderfully subtle and delicate or sensitive organ in the brain. The key with the amygdala, though, is we're born with it fully developed and fully functioning. It's very useful as a toddler to know who's nice and who's nasty. Who do you want to cry for help from, and who do you want to stay quiet around? And as the amygdala triggers panic responses, when we see threat, when we see someone squaring up to us, when we hear someone start to shout, it assesses the quality and it says, don't like this. I don't know what it is I don't like, but I'm just pretty sure I don't like it. It's that gut feeling that something's going to happen. And it triggers a nervous and hormonal response. First step might be that you start feeling butterflies. We start moving blood around our bodies to move it away from the stomach and move it into muscles to get ready for what's called fight or flight. It releases these hormones called adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. Cortisol is fascinating for me because it's the hormone that can get out of the body and into the brain. It's a steroid hormone. And as we release more and more of this cortisol, particularly, it increases the amount of emotional activation. And cortisol starts to inhibit the seahorse and the almond, and the seahorse and the prefrontal cortex. So we start losing the abilities that those structures are responsible for. Now, if we're a child, these structures are still pretty weak. They're still learning, they're still developing. So they become much more easily overwhelmed. As adults, if we've had a good enough life, they're pretty strong and they can resist some fairly severe, assaults by the amygdala. However, eventually, when we start to lose our temper, when we start to get too anxious, or we start to, not too anxious, anxious enough because there's something we think is serious going on, and remember, it is subjective, we begin to fail with our semantic and episodic memory formation. We stop being able to learn temporarily. Stressed people about to sit an exam can have memory blanks. I did, from personal experience, once sit down in an exam, and for 45 minutes I didn't know what to do. I was confronted by these questions. Thankfully, there's a silver lining to 3-hour exams. You've got 45 minutes to calm down and come back. But we also lose the ability of memory retrieval. If you think about some of those game shows where contestants are humiliated for getting things wrong, they've got a lot of social skills they've got to employ to try and not get voted off, all these things, they can forget very easy questions, in spite of maybe extreme skill in that area. So imagine an accountant not being able to add up 5 and 8 properly. That would worry me if he was my accountant, but not so much if he's on the weakest link. So we begin to lose that. We also start losing the ability to talk. We start losing the ability to remember the words we want. We start swearing a lot. We start changing the speech pattern. We might speak in very short sentences with long gaps in between as we're trying to resist this cortisol from overwhelming our prefrontal cortex, which helps us plan what we're going to say next. Or we may just give up and just start talking on great big long tangents for ages. So stress happens. And we start losing our social and verbal skills, yes. And eventually our emotional control disappears, and our ability to be considered, deliberate and planned will go. And once that's gone, what are we left with? We're left with that original response to stress, which results in impulsive and aggressive behavior. Because if we need to get away from something that we have deemed a threat, and remember, someone in a full panic, whether it's to do with being stuck in a lift or being faced by a Bengal tiger, you don't want to get in their way. They're very good at getting out of a situation physically. And this is what our children started doing. Suddenly this pattern, not started doing, this is what our children were doing. We started to realize that this is what they were doing. So we started to look at how we were working, except that these guys cannot hear the words I'm saying, but they can hear how I'm saying it. Except that my body posture when I'm talking to someone matters if they're beginning to panic. Except that maybe I need to leave a door open so that they can feel like they can escape and run away, because they might need to. And 10 stone of 10-year-old, well, Rottweiler's way less than 10 stone, and I don't want to stop them from leaving a room if they really want to. So, yeah, I don't mind. I might have to run after them to catch them later. But anyway, here's a simple, well, not simple, but fancy pictures of how the amygdala speaks to the adrenal glands to release that cortisol and adrenaline. And also the significance of 45 minutes, why we found that time out really works with our young people, because it gives them a chance to burn off or let their body reduce their adrenaline and cortisol levels back to where they started from. And there are deliberately 2 lines there. The blue one shows if we have a stressful episode, it could be nearly being hit by a cyclist if you're a pedestrian in London, any of you, or even around here. It takes about 45 minutes to calm down. But during that 45 minutes of trying to calm down, we're still extra sensitive to being re-stressed. Someone only has to look at us in a funny way, and we start getting these thoughts again. Our children play in playgrounds, they fall over, they hurt themselves. They hear laughter and naturally assume that it was laughter at them, and they go and do something such as walk over and punch a kid. It's something we try desperately to stop, but it can happen. And that's indicated by the sort of pinky purple line. I like to describe when I come home from a difficult day at work, difficult tube journey, open the fridge to find out there's no milk, my brother's drunk it all, and then my brother pipes up from in front of the television from where he's been sat for an hour. I said, Dave, would you make me a cup of tea? He doesn't get a good response because I'm already quite stressed. Whereas normally, if I'm quite happy and calm, I'm all right with making a cup of tea. I quite like cups of tea myself, so I'll make one for both of us. But the point being is if I'm stressed, he can pretty much expect me to turn around and go, do it yourself, you lazy little bugger, or something like that. There is also, at around 45 minutes after the last stressful moment, a little dip in cortisol and adrenaline. And this is often matched with tears in children and young people, or a sense of exhaustion, where they kind of just deflate. It is a natural response. I don't know the explanation behind it. Mother Nature is wonderfully obscure, but also strangely sensible. So we do need that 45 minutes with our young people to help them calm down. And we also need to accept that the minute they walk in is not necessarily their first minute of the day. Something might have happened on their way to the centres, or has happened that morning, within 45 minutes, that they're still stressed and anxious about. So we accept that we're going to need to open earlier than our lessons start. We're going to need to give people a bit of time to calm down, relax, come back to us, and then we can start working with them. Because I can ram as much maths in front of a young person who's stressed as I like, and they won't pick it up. Because if they're stressed, their prefrontal cortex, their hippocampus, it isn't working, so they physically can't do it. However, if I get them sat down, cup of tea, quiet space, out of the way of people, let them maybe talk if they want, maybe not if they don't, and then they've come back to me and they're ready for maths, they can start engaging and they can start learning it. Until we start quadratic equations, and then often the adrenaline levels go up again. However, this then started to inform us, well, if these guys are stressed, let's look for signs of stress. Let's see what's going on. There's a list of the kind of things that you'll see anyone suffering from or experiencing an adrenaline surge. They could be an athlete, they could be a victim of something, they could also be a perpetrator as well. So there's something very, very strong we had to think about as well, are our perpetrators who, some of our kids aren't very nice to each other. In fact, I'm surprised any of us survive teenage and childhood, because kids are incredibly good at being mean to each other. We started looking in pale-skinned people for flushed face. In darker-skinned people, we found it easier to see sweating, particularly on the top lip and across the forehead. One of the reasons I wear a jumper is to stop my shirt giving away my nervousness. Spitting, lips, they inflate and get darker. We're just pushing blood to the surface of our skin, getting ready to fight or run away, because when we're geeing ourselves up to get ready for these things, our metabolism gets higher. We start producing more heat. So we need to start keeping cool. Spitting. Cortisol gets into our saliva. It's got a horrible bitter taste. I like to have chewing gum or mints or something like that if I'm getting nervous. It takes the taste away. It also changes the consistency of the saliva because cortisol makes it quite thick. Drinking water or something like that can help. But our kids, they spit on the floor. They don't spit at us, but they'll walk around just clearing their mouth and spitting on the floor endlessly. Unpleasant, but part of what they do. So instead of telling them to stop spitting, we wait for them to calm down and then tell them to stop spitting. We see our young people, and well, any stressed people really, but their jaw muscles start pulsing and gnashing their teeth. At this point, they're actually incapable of talking. That cortisol has got in to the hippocampus at this point and has prevented their memory from working and recalling words that they need to use. It actually overwhelms speech centers as well, so they physically can't talk for that period of time. Before that, you might hear someone who's had a speech impediment. It gets worse if they have a stutter or a lisp. These are all very, very subtle and amazing skills that we have, this ability to talk. We're moving our lips, our tongue, all kinds of things in tiny little ways that takes us maybe, I think my niece she's not quite talking yet and she's 7 months old. I don't expect her to talk for her until she's about a year properly. It takes us a year to develop the skills needed for speech. It takes us 1 or 2 experiences to temporarily lose it. Shaking and hypervigilance, that what you're looking at kind of thing, eye contact, shaking and tremors. The kids actually they used the word shook instead of frightened. So I shook him up, or I got shook when something happened. They describe these physical symptoms, and I guarantee they have never attended any of these talks. So it's quite bizarre. Nausea and butterflies I mentioned earlier, as blood is moved away from our stomach, getting ready to panic. Claustrophobia, don't touch me, leave me alone, get away. Or any of you who work directly with kids will have probably heard that several times. If you want anyone who's stressed to kick off, and I hope none of you are Machiavellian enough to want to engineer this situation, back them into a corner. Close the door, close the windows, and back them into a corner, and they will get much, much more stressed, anxious, and much more dangerous. We see tensed muscles, particularly in the summertime when it gets warm. We see their muscles getting more defined as well as blood is pushed from the gut and into the muscles. Very useful if you want to get into a fight or run away quickly. And afterwards, we see them craving sugary food. We see them with the Mars bars, with the crisps, with the caffeine drinks, all sorts, full of sugar, because they've had something stressed, their metabolism has responded, they've burnt a lot of sugar very, very quickly, often in a very unhealthy manner as well, but that's a different talk entirely, and they want to replace this sugar. So these are all signs that our guys are getting pretty damn stressed. And environmentally relevant. This is a hangover from my degree days, I'm afraid. But how do we see this in the classroom? Signs that people are getting stressed. Well, they get frustrated when they can't explain what happened. You know, little Timmy, tell me why you punched Philip. If little Timmy is still in a stress situation, we're just going to be stressing him more, demanding an explanation. So we need him to calm down and then come and talk it through, because his memory of the event may be pretty sketchy. Eyewitness testimony is renowned for being very unreliable. It's why we have CCTV breeding across London, certainly, and the rest of the UK. Because we can't trust eyewitnesses. When we get stressed as a witness, even, our memory begins to play tricks on us. It begins to be affected by the stress of watching something nasty going on. We see a lot of fidgeting with our kids. Some may genuinely have ADHD. Some will just be trying to distract themselves from the feelings and thoughts that they've got an exam coming up, that they're going to have to go home and there might be an argument, that something happened recently that they can't get out of their mind. These sorts of things. Fidgeting is a great indicator of an anxious child, or person, frankly. Hiding and withdrawing to a safe area, our little ones particularly. And again, it sort of makes sense. If you're too small to run away, if you're too small to fight something off, your best bet is to go and hide somewhere and be as quiet as possible. So we work a lot with the quiet children as well as the naughty children through Kids Company. The response to authority figures. It's not always the same. Some people see authority figures as a threat. Again, this subjective nature, when the head of year can walk in and go, now, look here, what's going on? Other people can see them as a sense of safety because they bring calm to a classroom. It absolutely depends on that individual's perception of that authority figure. So I, before I worked at Kids Company, found the police to be genuinely on my side, helpful people, very nice, very kind, always willing to tell me where I needed to get to if I got a bit lost. We once got raided by the police. My experience of them was completely different after that. So sometimes it all depends on who they think you are, who I think they are, and what are my experiences of them to see how we respond to authority figures. Eating and not eating is a great sign. We sit and eat with our young people every lunchtime. We go and have a chat with the ones who don't want to eat because the butterflies are feeling sick, they don't want to eat it. And trust me, they love the food. After about a week, particularly new kids, when they don't eat for the first week or so, but after about 2 weeks, you see them merrily chomping away. So I'm quite reassured that it's not the food. And also this poor memory performance. So are they underperforming at school and yet they come across as really bright when you chat to them? There are verbal skills and things specific to certain forms of intelligence or IQ, but there are guys, we did a sample of IQ tests. Our guys are totally follow the national pattern of IQ, but they're all underperforming at school, and that doesn't match. So either the IQ test is wrong, and there are arguments for that, or something's happening in their school environment that is affecting their ability to learn new skills, new knowledge, things like that. So we've got to think about this and find ways. And This is why we want them to relax before they start their lessons. Management of behaviours, well, this was what I was talking about earlier. So what's my facial expression like? What's my body posture like? What's my tone of voice? Is there an exit that these guys can identify? Are they beginning to feel claustrophobic? Maybe just walking over and opening a door and letting some fresh air in can change the whole tone of an interaction with one of our young people. Is the environment safe? Is it a low stimulation, a low stress environment? If someone's walking in already wound up and anxious and people are running around and shouting that they don't know, they're going to stay anxious. Or is there an opportunity for them to get a bit of privacy, get away from observers, people looking at them, wondering who they are, sizing them up? Teenagers are very, very bad at assessing risk. They actually overestimate the threat from other people. They see us adults with totally neutral faces, and they assume we're more threatening. As adults, we come slightly back to the normal pattern, and we can see the difference between a neutral face and an aggressive face. But teenagers already, with no traumatic history, are already primed to assume that people are being threatening, particularly adults. Throw in a bit of trauma, throw in something nasty, something sinister that they've experienced from adults, and well, they're even more primed for threat, and understandably so. And exercise. Remember, stress can be something from in the body. So are these guys exhausted because they've walked up a flight of stairs, and grumpy because they've got low blood sugar and they need to get fit to help them find life just that bit easier? And are they getting a balanced and regular diet to avoid these sugar highs and lows? I know, in fact, I'm regularly reminded by my wonderful girlfriend, when I haven't had something to eat for a couple of hours, I start getting a bit grumpy. And yeah, a sandwich gets sort of presented. Yeah, low blood sugar makes us grumpy. All sorts, even having a headache or being thirsty. But then the other side of it, if we want to protect our guys from further stress, I mentioned the safe place earlier. Why aren't we all traumatized by going through something extremely dangerous and traumatic, which is childbirth, both for the child and the mother? Some women go through having children more than once, and it's a painful, dangerous experience, I'm told. So, something must be going on to mean, all right, well, we'll do that again because it's wonderful. Well, there's another one of these magical, no, I won't use that word, well, I already have, but neurotransmitter called oxytocin. And this somehow, and it's very poorly understood, but it's present wherever there's a bonding activity. It's very present during childbirth, both in the mother and the child, and hopefully the father if he's still conscious and in the room. But the other kind of places, and it's quite fitting that due to the venue, but it's very present on football terraces, in football supporters, when they're singing together. It forms this bond, this community. It's present wherever this behavior is going on. There is almost certainly a link. It's quite difficult to prove it. Have they got a balanced and supportive carer in their life, or even institution? We had a rather ego-bashing review by the Anna Freud Centre, came to the Kids Company Centre, and we were all walking around as key workers going, yeah, we have this wonderful attachment with our kids, you understand that, Anna Freud. And they said, no, they like the building. It's a lovely building, it's a lovely place, it's the same people are always there, that's what they like. It's not you guys, it's the building. They reviewed it and they made one concession, which was, well, some of them it's the building, and some of them it's their key workers. So, yeah, but we were the ones who keep the building open, so we were still proud of that. And we're pleased. We were pleased they liked the building because we put a lot of effort into it as well. Another protective measure is, how do parents view their kids? Do they view them with aspirations on their behalf? Do they view them as an investment? Do they view them as something to do better than me? Now, I'm not talking about the you will be a doctor kind of attitude, but be the best you can be. Go on, and I will help you as much as I can. Or are the children seen as a resource? Do parents feel they need their children because they're lonely? Do they feel they need them because Well, some of our young people say, Mum only had me to get on the housing list. I hope that's not true, but it's talked about. It's talked about. And this positive and trusting relationships with other people. Being friends just because you like people, not because of what they can do for you. A lot of our young people see everything as a transaction, a contract. I do this, you do that, then we're going to be friends. You break your side of the contract, and woe betide what happens next. Slowly and steadily, by spending time with these kids, they can just give us some positive and trusting feedback. They trust us because we're willing to give them this time, and that's all it is. And then this rich environment, by which I mean stimulating, lots of learning opportunities, things like that, in a sense of calm. And rehabilitation, consistency, cornerstone of any therapeutic approach is be consistent. Do what you say you're going to do. Keep your promises. So we have to be damn slow to make a promise, but very quick to keep one, because we'll get called on it regularly. Low stress, safe environment, as much education as possible. If kids can deal with school, it's fantastic. If they can't, we need to find something that they can deal with. Positive, trusting relationships I mentioned already. Innocent, positive trust, linked with oxytocin again, helping them find the sense of community. Because kids want it. They want friends. They want family. And if they don't find it in the household, they go out and find it on the street. And then it gets called a gang. And then it gets called a lot of things, and it causes a lot of trouble for them and for us. And at the time of writing, the response is extremely speedy, up to about 23 years old. In the last 2 weeks, I have found evidence saying it's about 30 years old. It's all tied in with how our brain develops and when it starts and when it stops. I like to use the language analogy. If you want to learn a language, go to the country where they speak it. No good going to France if you want to learn Spanish, but go to Spain if you want to learn Spanish before the age of 23, and you'll learn it without an accent. If you go after, well, new evidence is saying 30, you'll probably learn to speak it reasonably well, but you may never get rid of your native accent. So, in fact, almost certainly won't. And last of all, with all of that in place, we get some happy kids. So, thank you very much.